It's Mr. Broviac. Mr. Broviac, woo!
Is it A1?
That's like the third worst one I've ever
You have
done.
tape on your sleeve.
What? No, burn it all! Oh, it's right there. It's a little bookmarking thing.
Mr. Brovicast, what is your room number?
Now I don't have to burn it anymore.
It should be on
12, 58, 9, 6, 32 dinosaur fish. We are looking at Tuesday, I don't know, someday, March 26th, advanced class. We're getting into Gospel According to Larry. It's going to be a book that you, if you're home dead, you get your copy that you don't get to keep for yourself. It's going to look like that with a little fuzzy dude on the front of it. We're going to figure out why he's fuzzy. He rolled around in dog fur or something like that. The shoe drive, you can still bring stuff in. Camp info tomorrow, unless you're not here, or you owe me stuff, or you owe Mrs. Randall stuff, or Mrs. Melling stuff. Your myth tests have now been handed back. You can start doing corrections and getting those back to me. The sooner you get the corrections to me, the sooner I can fix your grade and make it better. Unless you like your grade, then you have nothing to make better. And then for these, I just want to see your thoughts on it real quick before we get a chance to start reading. So for each one of these, whatever you put down for your bell work, take a look at it. We'll see your Bodhi thoughts and stuff in there. Number 1, let's check your morals. Lying to your friends is okay as long as you mean well. Raise your hand if you agree, and then disagree.
I don't know what I wrote.
Wow, we've got a lot of liars. I like that. I feel the same way myself. I choose to lie to you on a daily basis.
Oh, I said that.
But I also mean well because I want to make you a better person. So I fully believe that lying to you gives growth. 2, it is okay to break the law as long as you have good intentions. Agree? Disagree? Oh, that's where lying to friends is okay, but breaking the law, we draw a line.
I would agree.
What do you do?
I yell at kids when I have their homework done. 3, the ability to be anonymous on the internet is a wonderful thing. Agree?
Yes.
Disagree? Interesting. And that'll play a big role in the book about the whole... We'll come back to that. 4, clothes only matter if they have a brand name on them. Agree? Disagree? And yet most of you wear brand name clothes, and so how very entertaining. Mr. Brown,
Mine's just
I
red. I got
embrace
this
them.
at Goodwill.
They're the easiest to find.
It's okay. You just go ahead and get your big irony doll out and just give it a big old hug. I love you, Mr. Irony. And then 5, you can easily limit yourself to a total of 75 things. Agree? And disagree? Quite the impressive fence some of you were sitting on there. As you straddled the middle of that.
Hard to figure out. No, wait, Mr. Brovicast. I could do it. But it would just be hard to figure out. Yeah, like the figuring it out. I heard stuff.
If it helps,
If I got like an older.
you've got about a week and a half, and you're going to figure it out.
Wait, really?
This is
No,
one
I
of the
can't
first
do
things we're going to
that.
be doing with the book.
Wait, we have to look at our family members too.
Hey, that's in the future. You worry about future you. Right now, we worry about
So I
current
can
lazy
have
you.
75 dogs.
Once again, we have Gospel According to Larry. If you, for some reason, lose the book and leave it here, you can get the ebook version. It's going to be on the website to help you out. One of the drawbacks to the audio book, which I've not really been able to find, is because it has a bunch of footnotes. If you were to flip through there, the footnotes are the little things that appear at the bottom, and the book is full of footnotes, which you're going to want to make sure you read because it makes it a lot easier to understand. But we'll get there in a moment. And then, see, got there the gospel things we'll get to, and then our Gospel According to Larry from that one. With this one, it's going to throw you off a little bit because it's real. I guess the best way to put it. And so it's based on things that happened a long time ago before you were born, around the turn of the 2000s. And so it's going to deal with, it's a life story from a kid, but the problem is there's this big event that happened, and so the author, Janet Tasjian, as we're going to find out in a moment, was not involved in it, but she met the kid that was involved in the whole thing. And so he wrote a story and then passed it along to her. It'll make more sense in a moment. So we're going to get into the little intro beginning bits so we get a chance to talk about it, try to help you out. It's a thing that, in chance, your parents might be familiar with it because it was way back during their younger times. But there's every chance because your parents were probably in their 20s or 30s, depending on how old, or teens if they're young, that they were not paying attention to this part of the world at the time. So we'll see. Anyway, we're going to start where it says a note to the readers because it's going to make things make a lot more sense. And this is being written to you by Janet Tasjian, the actual authory person from the front of it. And so she's telling you, explaining how this book comes to be. It says, while I was waiting in line at the local grocery store, a young man approached me asked me for the time. I told him it was 4:10. I remember it distinctly. And I continued emptying my carriage onto the conveyor belt. I don't know why she calls it a carriage. It's a shopping cart, but she uses the word carriage, which is always confusing. I thought so too, but no, she lives in New Hampshire, which is like England, but smaller and not. So I have no idea. So some people are just weird. Onto the conveyor belt. He hovered around the store's exit and approached me again as I left. He held up a copy of my very first novel, True Confessions. "Aren't you a writer?" I told him I was. "I've got a great story for you," he said. "Oh yeah?" I pushed the and now she calls it a shopping cart. I pushed the shopping cart toward my car. "You know who the best person to tell your story is?" He shook his head. "You." Whoa. He smiled, then offered me a bundle of typed pages held together with twine. It looked like a thesis, but smelled like the bottom of the earth. I didn't take it. There are lots of great publishing houses out there. I'd start in New York. You can always go the agent route, too. I finished loading the groceries into my car, then gave him my best nice-to-meet-you smile. "You don't understand. I'm not even supposed to be here." I closed the trunk and looked at him. Blonde hair, half grown out into its natural brown, serious eyes, slight build, peaceful smile, 17, 18 years old. I mean, he looked vaguely familiar. "This has to get published." He pressed the papers into my hand. "I don't know what else to do." He stood on one leg, the other one bent and tucked against it. It was a yoga position my son and I practiced all the time. "Tree pose?" I asked. He nodded. "I'm trying to stay balanced." Aren't we all? If you're unfamiliar with the tree pose, for those of you who don't do your yoga on Tuesdays with Senor to Compton, it's when you have the one foot that comes up and goes against the inside.
Don't put it on your knee.
Don't put it on. I can't go higher because I'm not that bent.
You can go lower.
You can go lower.
It's not good on your knee.
Once again, I don't do yoga either. I just see the pictures. See, I have the one there. See? That's the official internet. Internet never lies.
It's not on his knee. It's on his knee.
He is above it. I can't do that.
But
You can't go on your knee.
You can go lower.
And I'll just hold it like that.
No, it has to be on your leg.
Goodness gracious.
Mr. Brovicast bad at yoga.
So, tree pose.
Can you do your leg through it, like over
Goodness
it?
gracious. So that gives you an idea of what we have from there, which is Spanish for sassy children that need to get smacked. It's there.
Or stab with a butterfly knife.
I could do that too. It's not supposed to be here. The tree pose. He seemed completely unself-conscious. I just came back from Walden Pond. Have you ever been there? Many times. He pulled the paperback Walden from his back pocket and started to read. To be a philosopher is not merely to have settled thoughts, nor even to found a school, but so to love wisdom as to live according to its dictates, a life of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust. He looked at me, eyes shining. Isn't that the best? That's a book written in the 1800s. It's like the Tree Hugger's Bible. Walden, Henry David Thoreau, it's all about not making bad impressions on the world and trying not to ruin things and treating people well, hugging trees. What do you say to a kid standing on one leg while quoting Thoreau? I told him I'd read his manuscript. Now, I set it up like a term paper, he said. I typed it on an old manual typewriter out in the woods. Then I pulled stuff from the web, added some biblical quotes. He smiled. It'll all make sense. You'll see. He placed his foot firmly on the ground. If you decide not to help me, I'll understand. I asked how I should contact him. That's impossible, he said. I'll contact you. On the drive home, I skimmed through the pages on my lap. I sat in my driveway and continued to read, unfazed by the gallon of ice cream melting in my trunk. I thought he had looked familiar. I raced back to the grocery store to find him, but he had already gone. By the time he called the next day, I had read his entire manuscript. Well, he asked, gesundheit. His anticipation reminded me so much of my own, waiting for my first novel to get published. I told him I had another project I was working on, but thought his version of the story was important and needed to be told. I asked my editor, Christy, if she'd be interested in publishing the manuscript. After reading it, she was. Josh also gave me a disc with photos he'd taken. We placed them throughout the book. The epilogue was my idea to add another perspective. Do you guys know what an epilogue is?
Yeah, it's like
It's kind of like a prologue, but at the end.
Yeah, prologue means before, epilogue means after. So it's a thing that's sort of like, and the movie credits, when it shows you like what all happened to the characters afterwards, it's that same thing. They have it in this book where it tells you what happened to the people afterwards because they're all real people. Working on the book, I sometimes found Josh's story inspirational. Other times it seemed eerie and devoid of meaning. In my research, I found some people who said Josh suffered from bipolar disorder or ADHD. One teacher even said he thought Josh had an acute Messiah complex. All I know is the young man I met several times over the course of a month seemed perfectly normal. But don't go by me. I sit in a room and make up stories all day. When my editor mailed me the galleys a few months ago, I talked to Josh for the last time. You realize if we publish this, people are going to know that you're still alive, I said. This whole mess might start up again. His voice sounded calm and rational. It's really important for me to be honest right now. I want to write about the truth. I tried to reach him later to give him some copies of the book, but he disappeared. Again, this is his story. Janet Tasjian. So then we get a chance to get into it. A couple things in there. Bipolar disorder, if you're unfamiliar with that one. Bipolar is not split personality. Split personality is when you have like the multiple parts to who you are. Bipolar is where you have manic and depressive episodes where you get super hyper and then get super depressed and then get super hyper and then super depressed. Basically like your emotions are on a teeter-totter. It goes smack, smack, and it goes back and forth. That's really one of the things you'll sort of see that represented in him throughout the book, where he has these manic episodes where he goes like in this great big rush of stuff and then gets all depressed again. And I don't think he's manic depressive. I think he's a teenager, where that just seems to be like normal for them. The other thing they say is a Messiah complex. Do you guys know what a Messiah is?
Yeah.
What's a Messiah?
The Savior.
A person who comes to save you, like Jesus was known as that Messiah fella. And so a Messiah complex is where you feel that your job in life is to save people. Oftentimes doctors have a Messiah complex because like, you almost died, but I brought you back to life. And so they have a Messiah complex because they basically save you from death. And so some of the things this kid does is very similar to that, where he saves people. And then he ends up dying, and we'll sort of find out from that. Then we're going to find out it's not a death, and you're like, oh my goodness, his mind is blown. And all these things I get into, but it's not really a spoiler. We'll figure out as we go from there. So now, we turn the page from there, we get into the Gospel according to Larry. In my own words, by Josh Swinson.
Is that what he looks like? I thought it's like a ram kit on the front.
Well, you're going to find out in a little bit that you have no idea what he looks like, but there's a reason for that. Except for the one picture on the back.
Yeah.
That's kind of fuzzy too. But to there. Part 1. This is the disciple which testifieth of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. St. John 21:24. I haven't enjoyed a rant this much since Thoreau, Beth said. And we have a little footnote, which means you jump down to the bottom. There's going to be a ton of footnotes in there because he has to explain his thinking. It says, Henry David Thoreau wrote Walden and Civil Disobedience. We had to read them for English last semester. Very New England. Nature is good. Materialism is bad. Beth ate it up with a spoon. That's Walden and then Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. Once I get tree hugger dude. Do you guys know what materialism is? If it says materialism is bad.
It's like
Nate?
Item.
kind of wanting things.
To
Finding
love
things
stuff.
are more valuable.
There you go. The fact that you think stuff is more important than like connection to people. The more you own, the better off you are. There's a song from the 80s by Madonna called Material Girl. And it's about the fact that the more you buy her, the more she'll love you. Based on the same idea. We need people stirring up the way we think about things. My best friend, Beth, was trying to talk me into forming a Larry study group with her. His website, www.thegospelaccordingtolarry.com, received hundreds of hits a day, mostly from teens and college students. No one knew Larry's identity, and that conjecture alone was the source of several companion websites.
Are you kidding me?
Many kids at school were fans, but Beth was rabid. There we stop. Tomorrow we'll pick up and get into more of the actual book and stuff from there. Your homework is to not touch this book except to bring it back tomorrow. I hate children. It's on video. It must be true.